Brawl Stars has been out for 7 years already, and during that time there have been a lot of brawlers that broke the game at some point. Whether they were really strong or literally broke the game, today we're gonna cover every broken brawler ever. 8-bit. It's August 29th, 2019 and 8-bit gets added to the game. On release he was pretty damn strong, mainly because of a now removed star power called Extra Life. This is very much comparable to a Doug super where if you die, you'd respawn. However, this only happened once a match, making him an outstanding pick for solo showdown. You'd respawn with full ammo, which quickly got changed to 0, and he would have a 3 seconds invincibility shield. Aside from that, he was fairly balanced, with him only getting a few nerfs to his damage and reload speed. The main problem was that he was so strong in Showdown. Extra Life got replaced with Plugged In nearly a year after it got released. Amber. When she got added, she was busted. Her supercharge rate was fast, her damage output was insane, her movement speed was too high, she had too much health, and her reload speed was too fast. Basically everything that could be broken about a brawler was broken. Approaching her was not an option since every projectile hit with auto aim and she just melt anyone who got into her range. She was also kinda broken in May of 2023 where her mythic gear slowed down opponents for 20% instead of the 10% it is now. Controlling areas with her super was too easy and 3 weeks after this mythic gear got added, it got nerfed. Angelo. At first, people didn't realize how strong Angelo truly was until he started getting picked more and more. 4.4k damage with a fully charged shot and doubling this by using a super, which, by the way, was chargeable by hitting only 2 shots at max charge. His Empower star power, super fast movement speed, and his ability to float over water made him by far the best brawler at the time of him releasing. Ash. Ash has never been like really broken, as in he's the best brawler. Although there was a specific comp you could use to win every game, and that was Ash with Byron. So for Ash, his Rotten Banana gadget, Mad as Heck star power, and the Byron would make him an unkillable tank, which would deal a ridiculous amount of damage. There was, however, a time where Ash literally broke the game, and that was in June of 2024, where he would crash the game if you played him in duels together with Larry and Lawrie. This was a bug and you could exploit it for free trophies, so they temporarily disabled Ash. Barley. For this one, we need to go back to beta. During this time, Barley might have been the best brawler, for a heist at least. His super used to be able to stack, which meant that it would deal an insane amount of damage if you place your super right on top of the heist safe. This caused the safe to lose about 50% of its health. If you had 2 full supers, it would already be game over. This wasn't only strong on the safe, because you could of course also melt any opponent who came too close. Later in 2021, Barley received a ton of buffs to his extra Noxious star power, main attack damage and main attack range. There was not a single way for you to win a lane against Barley unless you had a really aggro brawler to pressure him. B always had her ups and downs, but when she has an up, she is broken. Especially when she got her second star power, Honeycoat. To put it simply, this is Draco's last stand gadget. You'd survive at 1 HP once per life. So if you died and respawned, you would get another go at this star power. It got nerfed to once per match after a few months, but then it became kinda garbage in the 3v3 modes. Just like Extra Life, this star power was impossible to balance, so it got removed and replaced with Honeycomb. We also can't forget about B's Rattled Hive gadget. Back in the day, the bees would pierce, allowing you to hit multiple people, and they dealt a ton of damage. Too much actually. Barry. Barry is the best support brawler, hands down. The fact that he also has the ability to control areas like none other, it makes him really strong. Bo. Despite Bo receiving a total of 25 buffs, he has never been super broken, except for a few times. Most notably was when his Tripwire gadget got added in August of 2020. It had no delay when you used it, meaning mines would immediately explode, and with his Stone Star power, you'd get a free kill. Also, he has always been really good with his Super Totem gadget, but it was really dependent on a certain team composition for it to become broken. So yeah. Lastly, he was also kinda broken when he received a supercharge rate and a 200 damage buff per arrow in December of 2023. But it wasn't game breaking or anything, he was just really strong. Oh, and I almost forgot about his Underworld and Horus bow skin, which back in 2021 gave a larger explosion radius when using his main attack, so he could basically shoot through walls. Bonnie. She's been fairly balanced, however she completely broke the game in October of 2023 where her supercharge gear would sorta crash the game. If you supered, well, this would happen. The game couldn't handle it and it ultimately crashed. Bonnie was temporarily disabled, just like Ash we mentioned earlier. Brock. In 2021, Brock received a ton of buffs to his main attack damage, making it go from 1040 to 1300 eventually, and that would be from 2080 to 2600 at max level right now. His rocket fuel gadget also gave a damage buff, making his main attack deal around 3k damage. He was crazy. Bull. When hypercharges were introduced to the game, Bull had a weird glitch where he would always have an 80% damage reduction when a super was used. This only worked at power 11 and it made Bull kinda overpowered. Also, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe. We're closing in on 1 billion subscribers, so every little bit of support is very welcome. Buster. On release, he was busted. His super lasted what felt like forever, 6 seconds to be exact, and you could basically cycle it. The damage he dealt was also kinda wild, considering with the stats he had then, he would deal 3400 damage right now per shot. On top of that, he had about the same amount of health as El Primo, and both of his gadgets and star powers were too strong. Byron. Actually, he was just a little bit stronger than he is now. The thing is though, there were about 40 brawlers in the game, which is just around half of the brawlers we have nowadays. There weren't too many answers to a Byron, and that made him kinda broken. Charlie. This is definitely top 5 most broken brawlers ever. I don't even know where to start with her. Alright, so her super. Let's start with her super. It lasted 10 seconds. Like, you will be out of the game for 10 entire seconds. Her digestive star power also got rid of 50% of your health, and if that wasn't enough, you could charge her super with only 5 hits. Of course, this isn't all, because she had almost no delay in between shots. You could just spam out attacks like it's nothing. Her spider's gadget had way too much health and it lasted too long. She also dealt more damage, had more range, and her projectile speed was faster than now. Charlie was insane. Chester. He was strong on release, to say the least. There was one part of him that was really strong, and that was his Jawbreaker super. It would deal 2100 damage. It had a stun duration of 2 seconds. You could barely miss it because it was so fast, and it also charged 1/3 of your super. Now sure, this super was broken, but Chester's damage as well. Chuck. The first ever brawler you could buy as an early access offer, and it was worth it for sure. Heist became completely unplayable due to one simple thing. And that thing was the fact that Chuck respawned with his super. Yeah, so after you placed down your post, there was no stopping him. It got nerfed so that you wouldn't have your super, and that's actually the only balance change that Chuck has ever received. Clancy. Very recent. Yeah. Bro, what is this damage? Colette. She was a different kind of broken. She couldn't kill anyone. Her minimum attack damage was 280 and this got buffed to 700, so that's nice. She received 3 more attack buffs, 2 super buffs, and her gadget got reworked and immediately buffed as well to make her a pretty good brawler. Colt. It's late November 2020 and Colt's silver bullet gets added. One silver bullet dealt the same amount of damage as 6 of his projectiles, meaning that if you hit every bullet with 1 ammo, it would deal the same amount of damage as 1 gadget. Colt also received a fairly decent damage buff 2 weeks after this gadget got released, and that made Colt absolutely broken. Cordelius. Upon his release, he could charge his super inside of the Shadow Realm, which created some cheesy strategies in Showdown for example. Massive hordes of Cordelius and Shelly players would team up and spend the entire game inside of the Shadow Realm, basically skipping the entire match. Darryl. When Brawl Stars was in beta, Darryl had a ridiculously long range with his super. A 23.3 tile range is absolutely insane. He could go from one to the other side of the map with a single roll, but he also had a lot of health and dealt a ton of damage, which all had to get nerfed before the game went global. Draco. Draco wasn't as broken as some other brawlers in this video, but his entire kit made him really strong, especially his gadget and damage reduction when using a super. It gave Draco a bit too much survivability. Edgar. You might remember when Edgar was released, it was complete chaos, with Edgars everywhere you looked. And with everyone unlocking him for free, he flooded the servers, which also crashed the game for a while. After he got nerfed, he became by far the worst brawler in the game for a few years, but then he got his hyper. Because of his Let's Fly gadget letting him charge his hyper as well, you could spam out hypercharges like it's nothing. It received a 62.5% charge nerf after the first week. Ems. You couldn't even come close to her. Ems's friend zoner gadget used to cover a ridiculous distance and pushed enemies really far back. Eve. When she was released, she would spawn a hatchling every single ammo. That is, if you hit your last egg. Luckily, that wasn't a big problem because her attack speed was incredibly fast and she had one of the longest ranges in the game. By the way, her hatchlings didn't only have 1000 HP like they have now. No, they had 3000 HP. Good luck dealing with that. And I almost forgot, 1200 damage per hatchling. Multiply that by 3 and that's an extra 3600 damage on top of her main attack, which already dealt 2400 damage per ammo. This made it so if she hit every single ammo, she would deal almost 11,000 damage. And that's not all, since on top of this insane damage, her super was also really easy to charge, needing only 7 projectiles to be hit in order to charge her super. Fang. Upon release, he was broken, just like so many other brawlers. It was mainly his gadget, which stunned for a total of 1 second. You could also recharge your super if you killed a pet or respawnable with his super if you had his fresh kick star power equipped. After this all got nerfed, he was fairly balanced until the day came where his super would charge in 4 hits instead of 5. When Fang received his hypercharge, which by the way you could easily charge if you had your fresh kick star power equipped, he was wreaking havoc together with Edgar. He could spam super after super after super, and the popcorn kernels he left behind dealing 2.8k damage. The Fang would get an almost guaranteed team wipe if they activated their hypercharge. Frank. You might think Frank is really strong after the rework and that's the only time. Well, that's not the case. Back in 2020, Frank received a ton of buffs, pushing his HP to over 10,000. And with most brawlers not having any knockback abilities, Frank could just walk into them without struggle. Later in 2021, his irresistible attraction gadget got buffed to deal double the damage instead of only 50% extra. Paired with his power grab star power, Frank became kinda broken as well. And now, after he got reworked, he attacks a little bit too fast if you ask me. Gale. When he was released back in 2020, his attack was comically wide. Supercell made it smaller though, but it dealt way more damage. And aside from that, his launchpad gadget had a range of 12 tiles, meaning that you could cover a ton of distance and your team got a very good early position in a game. Then in early 2022, his blustery blow star power got a buff to its stun duration, and this made it so Gale could usually cycle a super, meaning you'd get a free kill. Gene. He broke the game. Every time a super was used, the entire lobby would get a server error, crashing the game. Oh, and just like Ems, who we mentioned earlier, his lmao gadget was massive as well. Gray. When Gray was added, he was able to teleport his entire team immediately when using a super. This was very frustrating and overpowered, especially if they used something like a Jacky and bow comp. Besides that, he also had his grand piano gadget back when it was actually grand. It covered like half of the map, providing an insane amount of wall break. Lastly, his attack was barely visible, making it really difficult to dodge. Grom. It's late December of 2021 and Grom gets added. During this time, Grom could actually be seen as an assassin since both of his super and main attack will land faster the closer you throw them to yourself. His super projectiles also had a lot more range, about 8 tiles instead of the 6 it has now. Hank. The good old days where Hank was completely busted. His attack damage would scale really weirdly, so he somehow dealt way too much damage with a couple of power cubes or buffs from other brawlers like 8-bit and Ruffs. But that's only a small thing about him. The brokenness laid within the fact that he could heal when charging an attack, and if you were camping in a bush, well, people couldn't see you. On top of that, it didn't matter how much your bubble was charged in order to receive a maximum amount of supercharge, so after just 3 little taps with auto aim, you would already get your super. And to finish it all off, his It's Gonna Blow star power, it gave him a 20% speed boost, meaning you couldn't escape from him. Jacky. When she got introduced to the game, she was the best tank for sure. She actually got a 50% shield when she used her super, which was really strong, especially for a tank. Her pneumatic booster gadget gave a 38% speed boost, making her about as fast as a max super. And her unload speed was pretty fast, which received a 25% nerf only a week after her releasing. Janet. She was really strong on release. Mainly her super was overpowered, and she could use her drop the base gadget when using her super, which might not seem like such a big deal, but trust me, it was really good. Especially the gadget itself, like it lasted for a long time. It was really annoying to deal with. Aside from that, she also had quite a lot of health, and with a super that you could charge by hitting only 5 shots, she sorta dominated the meta at the time. Kenji. Mortis, Bibi, Edgar, and probably someone else merged into one. He's not out at the time of writing the script, but he seems to be kind of insane. 5.2k damage if you can hit your super, healing when you attack, and actually quite a lot of movement and versatility. Kenji is really fun and really strong. He has some of the best abilities, like this gadget, and the star power, which provides a 90% shield, which is very good against brawlers who only have one projectile, like Piper for example. Kit was interesting to say the least. He was completely broken, as in he was way too strong, and he was broken himself, with him having a couple of questionable bugs. Most notably was his glitch where if you collected 5 or 6 power cubes in Showdown, you'd get infinite supers. And then his power hungry star power, which was also completely broken. Besides that, his cardboard box gadget lasted for 5 seconds and charged super faster even if you moved. His yarn balls dealt 4000 damage at max level, and you would get your super back if you detached from your teammate before the time ran out. So after fixing these bugs and nerfing him a lot, he was fairly balanced. But then Supercell decided to hit him with a buff that gave his attack and super 20% more damage. This caused Showdown to be completely filled with kits because of the insane amount of damage you could deal with these buffs and Kit's power hungry star power. Larry and Lawrie. This, in my opinion, is the most broken brawler ever. To give you a perspective, they haven't been buffed, but they did receive a total of 11 nerfs and they're still at the top of the meta. Let's go over them on release. They couldn't die because of a certain star power, that's the first thing. They could destroy the high safe within 10 seconds because of a certain star power, that's the second thing. They again couldn't die because of a certain gadget, they had too much health, they could charge a super with 5 hits, they dealt too much damage and their range was too large. Oh, and their unload speed was too fast and Lawrie dealt too much damage. I mean, they were broken, but they also broke matchmaking. There were so many people playing the twins that Supercell had to enable duplicate matchmaking, meaning that every game at like 900 trophies and above had 6 Larrys. The only way to push was to solo queue and hope for other Larry teammates. Leon. He was always pretty strong, but when he first got added, he was insane. Leon could be seen as... Actually, you couldn't see Leon. Not even if he was right in your face. He only revealed his position if he attacked himself, or if he got hit of course. On top of that, his super lasted for 10 seconds and he became a walking nightmare. Lily. She was absolute garbage on release, but with a simple buff, which doubled her ammo, Lily suddenly became a menace. What a surprise! I do have to mention, her super damage got halved and the same thing happened to her supercharge rate when she received that buff, but that didn't matter too much. Lola. Right now, I think Lola is the most average brawler in the game. This probably won't age well, but sure. When she was added though, yeah, that's a whole different story. With her super equipped, she melted. Back in 2021, her ego did not have a 50% damage reduction, so her damage output was ridiculous. Meg. Supercell does not know how to balance his brawler. She's been reworked like 3 times and received about 25 balance changes. First of all, surprise surprise, she was broken on release. Meg used to spawn in her mega form, which meant that you first had to get your super in order to hop into your mecha. It took 6 hits in order to get it, which is 3 ammo. So when someone popped you out of your mecha, you'd have 3 ammo ready to auto aim and you'd get your super again. If you couldn't immediately do that, you would still have a 30-second lasting 35% shield with her star power. Also, something to note, her mecha actually had decaying health, meaning that you'd eventually lose it. After about 1.5 years, she got reworked and again became broken. This rework made it so she now spawned in her mecha, the health decay was removed and she wouldn't receive less healing from a Poco, for example. So yeah, she did receive a couple of nerfs with this rework, but it didn't do much. And then, recently, she received another rework. Her range got decreased, but yeah, she suddenly gets twice as many projectiles, which bumped her DPS up by a lot. Melodie. She was way too tanky, with a total of 8.2k health at max level. On top of that, her fast beat star power gave her a 24% speed buff with max nodes, and the shield gadget also gave too much tankiness. I also think she was really broken because people didn't really know how to counter her, especially in Brawl Ball, where quick dashes with her super would usually concede a goal. Mico. Same thing with Mico. It was really difficult to time your attacks in order to counter him, but nowadays most people know the timing. Aside from that though, Mico has never received any balance changes except for a buff and a nerf to his hypercharge, but he was still really broken on release. That was because of an infamous scaling bug where he would, just like Hank, deal too much damage. If he collected some cubes, he could suddenly deal 10k damage per ammo, which was not as intended. Mo. Considering he actually got nerfed by quite a lot before it was released, I'm concerned to know what he would have been like if that didn't happen. Mo is the fastest brawler in the game, faster than Max, whose entire personality is based off and around speed. Mo's damage output is also too much, and with attacks that are almost impossible to dodge, it's really annoying to face a Mo. Mortis. Mortis and broken. That's not something you'll hear very often. He was actually kinda busted during beta, where his attack would always have, well, this much range. Shooting the ball also didn't take any ammo away, so he could dribble, like, really well. Mr. P. Back in the day, Mr. P's attack wasn't able to bounce if it didn't hit an enemy or an obstacle. But this didn't keep him from being really strong. It was his super which was the problem. You killed a penguin, well, guess what? Another one would spawn only a second later. This infinite stream of penguins caused a lot of trouble for brawlers who didn't have piercing attacks, and it made Mr. P very irritating to deal with. Otis. Otis was completely useless on release. I mean, his super didn't even deal damage and his main attack was weak as hell. He did, however, literally break the game back in October of 2023. If you had his fat splitter gadget activated when you died, it would cause a server error which, just like Jean's super, crashed the game. Pearl. Pearl's overcooked gadget was insanely strong when she first got added, seeing that it dealt full burn damage instead of the 25% it does now. On top of that, it also charged her super with every tick and then basically melted anyone at max heat. A few months later, and she received a movement speed buff, and I don't know what's up with movement speed buffs, but whenever a brawler receives one, they suddenly become the most broken thing ever. With Pearl, it was quite the same, because she suddenly became the best brawler in the game out of nowhere. Penny. She was always pretty solid until she got a rework back in 2022. Yes, it has been 2 years already. This rework completely changed her. Her base HP went up by 600 health at max level, she got a faster projectile speed, less range, and the cannonball shot from her super always set the ground on fire. A couple of other problems arose with this rework because her super launched a cannonball every 2.5 seconds, and her burst damage from her main attack could deal up to 7,000 damage per ammo. You really did not want to get close to your teammates, and her salty barrel gadget helped out tremendously with this. RT was massive, but that certainly wasn't the problem. It was the fact that his super devastated anyone who would get inside of his range. With an insanely fast unload speed and one of the highest DPS in the game, he was really strong. The delay between his attacks got nerfed by 100%, but still, getting hit by those shots isn't very fun. And there was also this little glitch which made him completely busted in every mode. It only worked with his Crimson RT skin, and whenever you attacked, the super attack also activated. Not gonna lie, it was really fun to surprise people by randomly hitting them behind walls. Rosa. This is a fan favorite. When someone says broken brawler, a lot of people say Rosa was the most broken brawler ever. I can't disagree. At the time, with the brawlers that were back then, she was the most broken brawler for sure. An 80% shield that lasted for a total of 6 seconds was wild. And she could cycle super after super, making Rosa 1v1s very cool and epic and entertaining for sure. Yeah. Anyways, she completely broke the game, partially because she's a rare brawler, so you only had to open up a few boxes in order to unlock her, which meant everyone played her. Ruffs. With an unload speed of only 50 milliseconds, he could unload his attacks faster than almost any brawler in the game. Comparing this to how fast he shoots now, there is definitely a big difference. This lasted for about a month, and the only brawler that countered him was himself. Sam. Sam was kind of impossible to kill when he first got added, due to his hearty recovery star power, which healed him for 30% of his missing HP. Sandy. Y'all don't know how busted Sandy was upon his release back in 2019. To start, he could charge a super with only 5 hits, and it lasted for 12 seconds. Right now it's only 9, so you might be able to imagine how easy Sandy could cycle supers. Both of his star powers were also really good, with one dealing 200 damage per second, and the other healed for 300 per second, which was quite a lot back then. Shelly. Shelly in 2019 was something else. Her band-aid star power would heal her back up to full health, so she'd basically have 2 lives. You could run into anyone because you most likely wouldn't die. Showdown especially became Shelly stars, but also in other modes it wasn't fun. Then, just like Pearl, she received a movement speed buff. This one was more substantial though. She went from having a normal movement speed to having a super fast movement speed. It bumped her up from being the worst to being the best brawler in the game. Keep in mind, her Shell Shock star power slowed down enemies for 4.5 seconds, so even one small projectile from her super that hit you would mean death, since you were a sitting duck waiting to get killed. Sprout. Oh boy. 2020 Sprout was an entirely different story. His overgrowth star power was arguably one of, maybe even, the best star power ever to be given to a brawler. Attacks that don't make contact with an enemy will explode with a larger radius than normal. So how big was this radius, you might be wondering? There was no way anyone would miss a shot with those attacks, and believe it or not, this wasn't the only thing about Sprout that was broken. It was, of course, his super. And then mainly in Brawl Ball was the place where he could wreak havoc. You see, nowadays you can break Sprout walls if you have an invincibility shield. In 2020 this wasn't the case, so Sprout could just trap anyone inside of their net. This didn't only work on enemies, you could also lock up your teammates, making Sprout one of the most toxic brawlers ever. Squeak. Squeak wasn't very good ever, but when he got a second gadget, all hell broke loose. Having a lane against Squeak? Well, good luck. He has 3 gadgets that will slow an area down for 20 seconds. Squeak basically had the ability to shut down an entire lane for an entire match, and this made Squeak super strong and annoying to deal with. Then in July of 2023, his chain reaction star power received a buff, which made his attacks deal 20% more damage for every brawler that was inside of his attack radius. He suddenly had an insane damage output, and again, having a lane against Squeak would most likely end up with you dying. Stu. His glory days lay in the past. In 2021 to be exact. What made him so broken? Was it his damage? No. Was it the supercharge rate? No. It was the fact that his super had a knockback ability, making him unkillable if you were a brawler that needed to charge their attack like Frank or BB. However, Frank is debatable right now. Anyways, both of his star powers synergized really well with his knockback. He was just broken. I wouldn't be surprised if this also became his hypercharge ability. Surge. You might think Surge is annoying to deal with right now, but you haven't seen him in his prime yet. His 2 to max star power was a little bit different back then. The attack split, even if you didn't hit an enemy, which made his shots at stage 4 literally undodgeable. It's basically his hypercharge, but instead of 5 seconds, it lasted the entire match. This wasn't the only thing about him that was really good. No, he also had a teleport gadget which works like gray thingy. You couldn't move with Surge's super, but if you teleported onto someone, there was no way for them to escape your jump, and yeah, they would die. Willow. Willow has to be the wonkiest brawler ever. Her super crashed the game. I'm pretty sure the star power didn't work, Her attack took 3 business days to even deal any damage upon hitting someone, which was actually intended for some reason. It never made it into the game though, but you know, when they announced it, it looked like this. Supering and controlling someone was insanely laggy. There were and there are even more bugs with Willow's super, and she's just completely broken in the most literal way of the word. I get it though, the mechanics she has are really hard to code, so I'm not gonna blame anyone for this. Well then, those were, I think, all of the broken brawlers we ever had. Of course, there will be a lot more in the future, especially Walter and Jeffrey. Mark my words, when they get added, they're gonna wreck the game. Anyways, that was it for today. Huge shout out to my channel members and to everyone. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to sub, and I'll see you in the next one.